Kyle here from allmediareviews.blogspot.com, podcast number 6. I'm going to try to do, I don't know if I'll get through the whole thing, maybe I'll do half of it. An entry I worked a fair amount on for a little while and then published. It was like a week, 2 weeks ago, November 23rd. It seemed like it was more than that anyway, like 2 weeks ago. Favorite modern rock music songwriters / musicians. And I didn't rank these just because I hate ranking them. I mean, I'll just say Kevin Gilbert is my favorite musician of all time, and since he did writing the last 25 years, he recorded and everything like that, he would be number one, but there's so many others on this list, I'm just going to go through it. So, Micro Ackerfeld, of course, of Opeth, as I wrote, a big fan of most Opeth albums, the 2010 Opeth albums. Honestly, I don't hate, but I just don't have a lot of motivation to listen to them. But the period from Still Life to Ghost Reveries especially, every record is really good. Ghost Reveries being my favorite, but even Damnation. But yeah, he's the chief songwriter, and obviously he's a guitarist and singer of the band. So yeah, he definitely is one of them. Don Anderson, of most well known for Agalloch. He was not the main songwriter in Agalloch, but I assume he did some of the songwriting, and I think he's a guitarist. But of course, his project Sculptured, which I really love, their last record, Embodiment, was one of my top 10 records of 2008, and there's a new Sculptured record coming soon, hopefully in 2018. But yeah, Don Anderson belongs on the list, certainly. Matt Bellamy of Muse, the singer, guitarist, and he plays the piano parts, and he does a lot of the arrangements. While I'm not a huge, obsessed Muse fan, I like every Muse album. There's songs on every Muse album I like. There's some that are like the highlights, like Absolution and Origin of Symmetry, and the one that followed Absolution, which I'm spacing on at the moment right now, but yeah, there's always like 3, 4, 5 songs that are just, he always puts out songs I like, and so he belongs on the list. Black Holes and Revelations I'm thinking of. Josh Banash, of course, first and most prominently known from the band Kiss Kiss, the guitarist and singer. And but also, since Kiss Kiss has sort of ended, he did this project called Vuvuzela, which I loved. It had a lot of piano and his vocals and some sort of waltzy prog stuff. And of course, the humor side to Kiss Kiss and to his stuff, and then his solo music, which he's released, I want to say 2 albums and 2 EPs, or 2 albums and 1 EP, or I'm not sure how many. But just like his other music, there's a lot of these musicians, there's standout tracks on every one of those solo releases. Prog, punk, experimental, whatever. He knows how to really arrange string parts, which is one thing, like another songwriter on this really is mentioned about him. So anyway, Josh Banash, one of my favorites, certainly. Jeff Buckley. Yes, of course, Jeff Buckley, amazing songwriter, singer, and guitarist. I mean, even though a lot of the songs on Grace, his debut album, were not actually his own, he interpreted them so well that they sort of became his own. And then, of course, the second release, which he didn't actually see to come out, and were really just demos that got polished, the Sketches record. Some of the best stuff he ever came up with was on there. And then some of his live interpretations. I mean, he's just... Yeah, I mean, he's become really well known since he's died deservedly, although maybe he's become a martyr to a point. But his talent and ability to write and sing matches that. It seems, unlike other cases, I'd say Jeff Buckley totally deserves all the recognition, and I find that he's one of my favorites, certainly, even though he's been gone for now over 20 years. Ben Cooper of Radical Face and Electric President, and this Clone Project, sort of a multi-instrumentalist singer. He plays a lot of piano and guitar, of course. Great with dynamics and moods. He's the main guy behind a lot of these projects. It's mainly Radical Face and then this Clone thing that I love from a few years ago. I don't know if we'll ever see another Clone release, though. Casey Crescenzo of The Deer Hunter, and originally with the Receiving Under Sirens, and he's worked with other people, including Jesse Raborti with The River Empires. Yeah, he's a savant. The guy can play so many instruments. He can compose so many different types of songs. The Color Spectrum is a good example of that. And you just look at all the ACK records, and I've also often felt that he is kind of the way I see Kevin Gilbert. The modern, more recent kind of level of sort of talent and prolificness, especially. But yeah, that's why he's on the list, of course. Toby Driver, mostly for Maudlin of the Well, the 4 records they released, especially Bath and Leaving Your Body Map. And then a lot of people really love K.O. Dot. K.O. Dot, I'm sort of lukewarm about at best. Once in a while, I've heard some K.O. Dot music I liked, but it doesn't have as much metal in it. And I think he really works. His music has really worked well with the metal stuff, but he is the main guy behind those bands, although I'm sure there's other members of those bands, but I always look at as the front man, the singer, and singer of most of the vocals, and the ones who came up with a lot of the ideas for the music and the albums. So Joey Eppert of 3, he singer, guitarist, virtuoso, plays like this flamenco style guitar points, and he writes a lot of the melodies. It's just a tremendous singer, and yeah, he's the main guy behind 3. And he's got his own solo music as well. The first solo album, I've been to the Future, and then we have another record coming up at some point. So certainly, Fish of Marillion, of course. Yeah, the first 4 Marillion albums, and then he has that long, prolific solo career. Which, being I love Marillion, I don't actually know as well as I probably should. But Rain Gods with Zippos is probably my favorite of the solo stuff that I've heard from him. His last couple records were pretty good. The 13th Star and I'm blanking on the one most recently. But yeah, and of course just all the contributions he did lyrically, vocally with the first 4 Marillion records. He belongs on the list, even though Marillion stuff he did was going back to the 80s. But Fiacre, yeah, of course, he's this guy who's got this quirky style, a lot of different influence of lounge music to prog music to metal to jazz. Yeah, he even though he haven't released that much music, like 5, like maybe dozen songs, 2 like an EP, and then 2 EPs technically, and some other stuff and some covers. Everything I've listened to, I love from the guy, and I'm projecting him to be one of my favorites for the next couple decades, especially. I hope he has a very prolific career. But he seems to be very interested in making videos and playing live, and so that's maybe why his studio recordings haven't come out to the extent that I would hope, but it makes sense. So Kevin Gilbert, I've mentioned again, all his projects, his solo music. He was in Toy Matinee, Giraffe, of course, the singer, the piano player, guitar at points. He plays drums on his solo music. I mean, he did everything, basically. That's one reason why he was so amazing, is he could play so many, and he could play so many so well, and he came up with songwriting ideas, and as a lyricist, I need to make a separate recording just about him if I have not yet. So, yes, I've babbled on about Kevin Gilbert enough, and I will continue to babble on about him. Daniel Gildenlow of Pain of Salvation, mainly. Of course, he's the main songwriter and the vocalist and the guitarist, one of the guitarists, and oftentimes the lead guitarist, not always, with Pain of Salvation. And of course, Pain of Salvation, I love those first 4 records. Those are just like classics, of course, and then the stuff that's come since, I've enjoyed all of them to different extents, including the newest one. Yeah, and then he's been involved with Transatlantic and Hammer of the Gods, and as a musician, as a talented singer and multi-instrumentalist. Well, he didn't compose any of that music, but and the Flower Kings, of course, I don't know if he actually did any writing with them either, but he sang and played some instruments. But anyway, yeah, so Daniel Gildenlow is certainly one of the most talented musicians that have been making music the last 20-25 years, one of my favorites. Jimmy Necco of Ours, he is Ours in a lot of ways, although they've always had different musicians play a lot of the other instruments, the drummers especially, but he's the main singer and the main writer and singer, and he plays guitar, of course. He doesn't do a lot of the guitar parts, but I'm sure he composes a decent amount of them. But yeah, he's an amazing singer, and his songs have resonated with me really like a ton, just since getting into being a fan of his for like 12 years now. Imogen Heap, While she's not that prolific with her solo music, her album "Speak for Yourself" is a stone cold classic. I love that record, and she's classically trained and plays piano and sings, of course, and she composes basically everything on those. Uses a lot of technology and everything like that. And she has a couple other solo records which I like. Her last one, Sparks, I really liked. But yeah, I mean, and she's more or less doing not everything, but a lot of it, and writing basically everything. And then of course she has Frou Frou as well. So yeah, Imogen Heap, definitely one of my favorites the last 20, 30 years, something like that in music. Marketa Irglova of the 12th Season, of course, originally, and then she's done like 3 or 4 solo albums, sort of chamber, orchestral pop music, folk music, pop, folk pop, or whatever. She plays piano, and she's got a great voice. I'm not sure how much guitar she plays, but I found when I saw her live a couple times, I think she did play a little acoustic guitar. But yeah, just as a composer and a singer, she's awesome, and I can't wait to hear what she does next. I'm looking at this. I'm probably going to stop midway because this is going so long. But so just to move to the next few names, Daniel Johns, of course, of Silverchair. The last 2 Silverchair albums I really like, Diorama and Young Modern. And then, of course, he's one half of the Disassociatives, which is like a electronic power pop band, which put out one really amazing record and an EP that was under a different name. I cannot believe it's not rock. But yeah, I mean, he's a talent. His first solo record that came out a couple years ago, I didn't care for. He was doing some sort of orchestral interpretive thing before that, which was like a soundtrack for a movie or something, or maybe it was a play. I really was liking too. I'm not sure if that was all on him, but just you count his stuff as with Silverchair and the Disassociatives. He's definitely a large talent, a really good singer, and a guitarist, so he belongs in this list too. Kimbra, of course, pop songwriter, singer. I'm not sure how much of the instrumentation she does, but she writes a lot of it, and she knows what she's looking for. She's got so many influences. She has played some acoustic guitar, but I know a lot of it is just, she knows what she's looking for in her songs, and she's written some amazing songs and amazing vocal lines. So, of course, people got to know her from the Gorgia song Somebody They Used to Know, she has a great part in that song, but she's done other stuff that's eclipsed that in a lot of ways. So, let's see here. Brent Knopf of Menomina, formerly Menomina, and Ramona Falls. Of course, there's been 3 Ramona Falls albums. All of them I like. The first 2 especially. And then among the Menomina records he was with on 4 or 5 albums from them. A lot of his songs, because it was like a 3-song writing team, monster kind of thing with Danny Simon, Justin Harris. I find that Brent's songs were my favorites frequently on those. Not always, but frequently. And his vocals, and plus he is a multi-instrumentalist. He plays guitar, he plays piano. For all I know, he even plays some drums and everything on his albums. So, and he does production work. So, yeah, Brent Knopf certainly belongs on this list. Matt Mahaffey, also known as Self, which, based on his name, obviously he is the band, more or less. He plays drums, sings, guitar, keyboards, and any other instrumentation. He's released 7 albums and 3 EPs under that. Plus, he's worked with Call Florence Pow and Apes and Androids. And then he has this project called Wired All Wrong. He's a really prolific songwriter. He just does it in the studio. He's actually been a touring musician with, just like Mike Van Aert, with Beck and some other people. And he does soundtracks, like Disney soundtracks and commercial. That Expedia.com thing was his, that little jingle. So the guy really has a lot of talent as just someone who can come up with melodies and parts, harmonies, that kind of stuff. If you listen to Self's kind of all over the map in some ways. I mean, they're kind of like Prince, kind of like Beck, kind of like I'm not sure. I mean, Weezer to a point, or Jellyfish. I mean, it's pop music to a point, but it runs the gamut. And the fact that he makes music of so many different pop variations kind of speaks to his level of his talents as a musician, as a writer. So, all right, well, I'm gonna stop that. This is part 1, and I'll try to finish this up in the near future, sometime in the next few days maybe. But thank you for listening. Please comment, please like, please subscribe, and put it, if in the comment, if you could do it, put your top 5 or 10 songwriters that are modern songwriters. Someone who at least has been writing since the mid 80s, if not maybe 90s. I don't consider people that wrote in the 60s and 70s, quote unquote, modern songwriters, because they started out then. They may be making music now, but they're not, quote unquote, new songwriters. But especially, I almost think the 90s, but, like having Fish in there is sort of, you look at his solo music was all in the 90s, basically, mostly in the 90s and early 2000s. But yeah, please leave a comment that with some of yours, and, talk to you next time.